Thanks for tuning in. We are here in conversation with Mr. Neal Baumann, who is a global financial services leader at Deloitte. We are here to talk to him about green financing and how global banking system looks at India. Hello, sir. So in the recent past, Japanese banks like Mizuho and a Brazil-based bank has showed interest in tapping into Indian banking system. What do you think is the most attractive point for them to come back to India? Because we have seen in the past that foreign banks have downsized their consumer banking business. So what has changed since then?
So firstly, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's wonderful to be back in India. And I'm going to answer the question in the context of that. I think what's causing external banks and other financial institutions to relook or look at India for the first time is fundamentally the basis of how dynamic this marketplace is at the moment and the forecast into the near term and long term around that dynamicism. As you know, most banks, for example, around the world struggle with growth. Those that get growth in certain marketplaces struggle with the profitability elements of growth. And I think India is one of these marketplaces that is just all about growth, and it's all about a lot of quality growth. So it's understandable that it's attractive to pick for other institutions to relook at the marketplace and be very interested in entering the marketplace at the moment. So this is a growth story from my perspective.
Right. But we have seen that in the past, RBI had come up with this system where they would want foreign banks to have a wholly owned subsidiary.
Yes.
And that would mean added cost and a lot of regulations to go through. Do foreign banks want to go back to the same? So what has changed since then?
Well, so I think regulation and complexity around regulation is pretty much pervasive around all marketplaces, right? I think what has clearly happened with the RBI here is the level of sophistication in which they operate, the way they embrace the fintech community and balance that out is a very positive stance and posture for them to take. So I think actually I would contend that the way that the RBI actually operates at the moment is actually an attractive point rather than a distractive point at the moment.
Right. So when you talk about fintech and sophistication, what do you exactly mean by that?
Well, so for example, still many of the regulatory regimes don't try and embrace, understand, curate the fintech community, whereas here the RBI actually has determined in recent years to provide regulatory playpens for fintechs to be able to experiment and learn in a sort of safe environment, have regular open dialogue and discourse with the fintech community, and that's really best practice around the globe. And there's other economies that do that, but there's many others that don't do that. And I think that creates an environment of confidence and there's a transparency and openness around how all markets around financial services start to operate together.
Right. And one interesting thing that has happened very recently over the last few years is that RBI has been giving very strong focus on compliance.
Yes.
So fintech companies and NBFCs and banks in general now have to be compliant, and otherwise RBI is going to take an action against them. So I think that could be one of the reasons as well.
Yeah, and to go along with that, the sort of the orientation to more of a principle-based regulatory regime, which actually encourages and fosters the right kind of behaviour around some of these things, right? So, so with any regulatory change, with any change of posture in any economy, it creates disruption and disturbance, and causes some degree of anxiety. But I think the proof is in the pudding in this marketplace. The confidence that those kinds of changes of posture are creating is actually encouraging financial institutions to, as I said, re-engage or revisit into the Indian financial services marketplace.
Okay, makes sense. Going on to the next thing that people are talking about is the green financing.
Yes.
Across the world, there has been a lot of conversation around green financing, and to my amazement, the market has not really picked up. abroad as well as in India. So some of the conversations that I have had with Indian banks who are giving out green deposits, who are raising funds through green bonds, and they're giving away green deposits, they're saying that we are expecting sustainably conscious depositors to come in and deposit their money, but there's also a cost angle added to it. There's no tax benefit on these products. So what are some of the challenges that you feel are going to lead to a little not so developed green financing market?
So I would say this stuff is hard in every marketplace. It's a super complicated and very important topic to talk about. So whether you're in Europe where you have lots of advanced reporting, regulatory and stuff like that, or you're in a more emerging economy that has to make some more significant shifts around the baseline economy in order to meet sustainability guidelines, it is hard, right? It's hard for just about every industry and every economy. It's super hard for financial services, as you know. The reality is we need to be mindful of our own scope 1 and scope 2 and internal scope 3 kind of requirements around greening. But we also have unclear signals in many places around what our responsibility is to influence our customers to behave in a certain way, whether those customers are businesses that we're financing or providing equity support to, or whether they're consumers in what we're doing. So it's super hard because it's just a very, very, very complicated equation, if you want to think about that, right? And it's hard because in many marketplaces, there's a lot of near-term focus around the necessity to comply from a reporting perspective. So everybody's focused on, I have some responsibilities to my local marketplaces to be able to show that I'm doing the right thing just around the things that I'm doing if I'm running a bank or an insurance company. Then when we come to talk about our responsibilities around shifting behavior around consumers and corporates as a bank, as an example, the strategy is even more complicated because there's questions around to what extent is it my responsibility to lean into it? How do I calibrate how hard I push in this, how much emphasis I put into it, how quickly or how aggressive I get around this? And the reality is right now is there's uncertainty and lack of clarity around signals as to how will our shareholders respond to it, how will market analysts respond to me making these moves. So there's unevenness around how you calibrate your move into work. The example you gave around consumers in India, there's unevenness around how you calibrate around that, right? And unfortunately, and I assume it's the same in many countries because we've seen it happen all over the world, is that unfortunately a lot of the chief executives and some of our banks and other financial institutions, when they've got ahead early and made pronouncements around what they're going to do to help finance or help encourage the transition to a lower carbon footprint around their economies, have not necessarily been rewarded by the media and by financial analysts in a positive way. There's been incidences, well-documented incidences of criticism and stuff like that. So I think it's just complicated because it's massive global change at a scale. And if you're running a financial institution, understanding how to, as I said, calibrate how you do that it's just hard, right? It's going to take time to go through a process of experimentation and understanding, how this all works out. And let's just be honest, influencing customer behavior is hard. Yeah. And everyone around the world is learning as consumers. You and I are learning around what this means. We're learning to calibrate our beliefs around what the future we want for our children and how we want to live day to day. And there's, as you point out, there is rather significant asymmetry between different economies that have different start points around their carbon footprint and the complexity, the capital needed, and the change shock with shifting to that the global south that's much often talked about, for example. So I think it's just really hard and it's complicated, and unfortunately it's going to take some time to get some patterns around that. What I would say is that despite lack of support with some of the statements a lot of financial services senior executives made in the marketplace over the last few years, what I always say is, we want to continue to encourage the senior leaders of banks and insurance companies around the world, and including in India, to be adventurous, to be bold, to not be gun shy with respect to some of the bad reaction that's happened today, because it's the leadership of this industry in a country like India in particular. It's the leadership positions that the leaders of these financial institutions take that are really going to, I think, make a difference to how quickly and how successfully we go through this sort of this carbon footprint transition that we clearly need to go through.
Right. Right. So I was having a conversation with the sovereign fund, NIIF. So they were talking about how foreign investors are very excited about India's transition to a green economy, and they are interested in investing into India so we can have a greater access to capital, but it's not necessary that it'll be at a cheaper cost. So that is also one of the things that is probably hampering the transition or the green financing market to really pick up?
Well, yeah, the cost is significant, right? Let's not. It's well documented. It's significant. It's significant in India. It's significant in most marketplaces. But again, I would say it's going to require industry leadership. It's going to require bold leadership from our bankers and our insurance companies, our investment managers, etc., to actually take positions around that and saying, we obviously need to rebalance our profit and societal obligations, and that's a challenging thing that I think most organisations are going through at the moment in the financial services industry. Yeah. But again, I just want to underscore it. We want to encourage the leaders of our financial institutions to take those bold positions to accelerate it. It's like everything else. Costs will start to come down the more efficient we become around these things. Costs will start to come down as innovation is sort of sparked to be able to sort of help accelerate this transition. But that leadership that I know the executives in India have in the financial services industry is just encouraging them to continue to continue to be relentless and not let the pressure off, despite what early signals might look like.
Right. Coming on to the last questions, Neal, in a fast-growing economy like India, where dependence on fossil fuel is integral at this point of time, because we have to have resources to power our electricity plants and other industries who are hugely dependent on fossil fuels. How do we strike that balance? How do banks strike that balance between financing a fossil fuel project or
the moral hazard conversation? Yeah, look, that's an important, and that's why I said that's where being bold and as leaders is going to come in, and it's super important. So the fundamental question, of course, is what is my obligation to force a transition that's going to be disruptive, and like, why is it my responsibility to do that? Again, I only say it, so India has an admirable economy, has an admirable financial services industry at the moment that's built for growth and built for scale. The question is going to come down to, how if I'm running a financial services institution, how I'm going to get innovation within my bank or whatever my institution, innovation rates, so that I'm not disproportionately financing or investing in companies that can make the transition faster. It's how do I figure out what the opportunity is to help those organizations that have more challenging carbon footprint profiles. What can I offer them to help them be better at their transition? I think that's really where it comes down to. So, we need to help everybody. The problem is everybody goes and helps the easy targets. It creates a distortion that's economically not good and from a profit perspective. But it's really about, I made the comment before around innovation. What do I need to do? What are the opportunities for me to innovate in a way that allows me to become an advisor, so to speak, to help organizations, small businesses in India, for example, make that transition at scale, so to speak. So we obviously have some amazing new technologies coming into the marketplace, like generative AI, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, how do we use things like that as large financial institutions to build them into the offerings that we take to the marketplace to bring a more equal transition pathway into the Indian economy is the way that I think about it.
Right. So A, lenders have to make bold choices, and B, there has to be a balance between financing the...
Yeah, so continue to be bold about being leaders in the economy around this. And I know that nearly every senior executive at a financial institution that I speak to, behind closed doors, they're extremely committed to the community and societal obligations around sustainability. So I don't doubt this commitment, massive commitment by the executives that run all the financial institutions in India. So the commitment's there. The question now comes down to is continue to push forward, to be bold, to be fearless when it comes to innovation and experimentation to help this sort of happen. It's going to need a non-traditional approach for banks and insurance companies and investment managers to be able to do this at scale. And I just think there's massive opportunities, as I said, to leverage new technologies and other things. I look at this as a positive opportunity, not a huge cost. I think the cost will sort itself out over time, the financing, the green transition. Again, I just want to we just want to encourage people to have that bold innovation mindset and apply it to this opportunity here, right?
All right. Thank you so much, Mr.
That's
Baumann.
Okay. My pleasure.
Yes, thank you
for having me.
Thank you for taking our time to speak with us.
Awesome. Thank you.